Well, good afternoon. It's Steve here, and it's Monday. Thought I would do another, Facebook Live. And so here's what I'm going to talk about. I did a post the other day and had several requests to expound on it just a little bit, which is what I decided to do. So I'm going to do a little mini series on the post that I did. The post. Hey, Jair. Hallelujah. The post I did was why many relationships don't work, and really the 10 things you should never do. So I've worked with people for more than 25 years now, especially people in relationships. So I've had my fill of consulting and counseling and therapy and all those different things with people. And as you know, I'm a behavioral analyst, so everything I do, I stem from a behavioral / emotional / motivational / axiological standpoint when it comes to people. So I thought what I would do is start off with the 10 things that you should never do in a relationship, and I'm just going to go through each one of them in a series of presentations. So this presentation will be number 1, the first thing you should never do. And so I'm going to go ahead and screen share, and I'm going to call this Never Neverland. So the 10 relationship nevers. And the first thing I want to talk about is point number 1. Never say you make me a better person. So what do I mean by that? I've got a series of slides that I've put together kind of to keep the thoughts streaming and something you could visualize and look at. But what is this never say you make me a better person all about? So the first thing is if you can't be a better person all by yourself, you have a problem. And that's all I put in the post for number 1, but I'm gonna expound on it. Who you are and who you're becoming and who you've been is centered in your own brain. Other people have influential powers. Other people come into your life and they come out of your life. But as a person, you are in this world solo. And who you become and who you are as an individual is something that's completely up to you, and it's something that you either do or you don't do. So if you're not contributing to a relationship or the relationship, you're consuming it. And that's one of the things I want to talk about. When we say another person makes us a better person, it's the word make that I really have a problem with. Nobody can make you do anything. If they do, then you are subject to their brain and not your own. And this isn't something we think about as people. It's just things we say off the cuff, or in a kind of a roundabout way of not taking personal responsibility in the world. But in all the work I've done with people and relationships, I find there are 2 types. You have your emotional feeler types and you have your logical reasoning types. The emotional feeling types tend to struggle more in this area. All their decisions tend to be based upon how they feel in that moment. And typically, feeler types, those who have the greater soft skills in the relationship, tend to be more reliant on other people for moving forward in the world. I don't know why this is. I could speculate, but I don't want to here. But this is what we see consistently. So the two feeler types, one is a feeler and the other is a feeler helper. So if you're familiar with the DISC paradigm, it's the yellow and green traits. So optimism and patience as emotions. And these types tend to loop in a limbic fashion with other people. In other words, there's a deeper connection to the brain of the other person they're in relationship with, and typically with that comes some form of reliance. So relying on someone for feeling good about yourself, relying on another person for feeling happy. You can't do that. You can't, in relationship, get into a position to where you're counting on another human being for anything when it comes to wellness and health personally. When we enter into a relationship in a healthy state of mind, we tend to contribute to the relationship. So we are in the relationship more of a giver. If you enter a relationship half-baked or not emotionally healthy, then you take in the relationship. So what does that look like? Well, imagine only breathing in. Well, it's unsustainable. And so it's up to ourselves to make ourselves better or get ourselves in a position to be better. If I can make you a better person, then I can make you a worse one. And the reason simply is this, that you're relying on another human being's decisions and behavioral and emotional patterns for sustainability. And that doesn't work. You can't do it. It's known as a need-oriented relationship, and we're going to get into that in some of these other ones as we go over them later. Your life is a product of your own decisions, not somebody else's. So Jair's got a good question here. What if both are feeling types? Then what happens is then the relationship will seesaw. Whoever's feeling best tends to carry the relationship during that time, while the other individual ends up reliant on them being carried in that way. You don't often have two feelers in a relationship. As a rule, you tend to have feeling and logic-based types because opposites that attract, they attract in behavior, while similarities can create endurance in what motivates us. Most of your sitcoms on television are based upon this model, where you have a feeler and a logic. So think if you've ever seen Everybody Loves Raymond. So Raymond is a feeler, his wife is a logic. If you've ever seen The King of Queens, Kevin James, he's the feeler, and Leah Remini, she's the logic. And so, typically this is what happens in relationships. When I say typically, I mean more often than not. I'm not going to really give you a statistic here, but I'm going to guess, if I would, it's between 58 and maybe 65%. So we have to realize that as people, our own life is a product of our own decisions, not somebody else's decisions. And it's really important that you understand that. And however you enter the relationship, that's where the relationship's going to begin, and that's where the relationship's going to take off from, and that's how the relationship's likely going to go. I have seen more than my share of people who are in a relationship and their relationship goes sideways, then they enter another one only to go sideways again. And sometimes 3's a charm. Oftentimes 2 is not a charm. It's one disaster after another. And the reason being is because feeler types will rebound a relationship for another one. And the reason for this is because they need connection. Logic-based types can go solo for a while, and it doesn't bother them. Feeler types can't. So they pick up with somebody else pretty quickly. There's no time to get back into a healthy position emotionally. There's no time to evaluate where you're at and where you went wrong in the relationship. There's no time to evaluate where your emotions are set at and what those intensities are, to really take a good in look as to what your worldview is, as to where your part that was played in the relationship created problems and challenges in that relationship. There's no time for that. And to do that, it takes a couple years. You can't do that in a couple weeks, a couple months. It's not possible. It takes you 30 years to get where you are. It doesn't take you 3 days to get out. And so your life as it is a product of every decision you've made up to this point, and it has nothing to do with anybody else's decisions other than your own decisions. Nobody is responsible for that but yourself. You can only enter a relationship as is. Now, people don't think about this. Now, when we're purchasing a car and there's a sign on it that says "as is," what do? What's your first thought? I know what mine is. What's wrong with this thing? And trust me, there's plenty wrong with all of us. But when we're courting in relationship, what do people do? They do the same thing they do in a job interview. They put the right foot forward. One of the things we do at the Behavioral Resource Group in working with companies and trying to hire the right person the first time is we measure their behavioral frame set, and we measure their concealed behaviors as well as their intended behaviors. And when we measure concealed behavior, we're actually measuring the left foot. And so, although people are trying to put the right foot forward in the interview, we know what the left foot's going to look like when it comes forward later on in about 6 months, when they settle in and become safe and feeling, that they can just be themselves. And, we've been able to, salvage a lot of situations because of our ability to do this. The same happens in a relationship. We put the best foot forward, but we keep the worst foot back. And trust me, we all have 2 feet. We have a left foot and we have a right foot. Everybody has a left foot and a right foot. But in relationship courting, we only put the right foot forward simply because we're trying to make a good impression. Now, some people are better at pulling the wool over somebody's eyes than other people are. And oftentimes when people are not trying to put a best foot forward, they just show up, this is who I am, take it or leave it, they offend the other party because they don't mask their, quote, left foot attributes or their negatives, so to speak. And so it's really important that you understand all of these things. So you can only enter a relationship as is. You don't enter a relationship as who you're going to become. You enter a relationship who you already are. And it's a product of every single year that you've been alive. Hey, Mary, good to see you. I was just thinking about my decision making in my career this morning. I'm still not there yet, and it's frustrating. I've allowed others to inhibit my decisions. Yeah, I get that, Mary. Mary's my sister. So, yeah, it's important that our decision making is about our world, our life, and our circumstances. Now, other people are in our life, but they shouldn't be our life. They are in our life. And one of the points I'll bring up as we go through the series of the 10 nevers is never receive your life from your partner. You can only share your life with your partner. And the same goes for work. You can never receive your life from the people at work. You can only share your life with the people at work. So what kind of life are you bringing to the table? And that's the life you live. As other people come into our life, what happens is their behaviors, based upon their emotional framework, will automatically begin to press buttons in our brain. If you're independent, self-willed, and stubborn, or you're matter-of-fact, logical, and moody, or if you're driven and to the point, or maybe you're a conflict avoider, or maybe you're hesitant, and maybe you're a poor decision maker. Maybe you're unconventional. Maybe you're calculated and neat and exacting. So whatever you are, you bring those dimensions to the table in relationship with other people. And we can only be ourselves. And we don't see other people as they are. We see them as we are. And because of this dynamic, human beings offer the best opportunity for failure when it comes to relationships. And it is for these things that we're talking about here. So, number 8, your partner may influence you, but they can never change you. And this is something we have to understand, that although I can be influenced, and sometimes we're influenced because somebody else makes us aware of the way we are or how we think. And oftentimes, if you're a person with greater soft skills and somebody makes you aware of the parts of you you don't like, then you retaliate. What person says, you know what, you just reminded me of a side of me that I'm not really happy with, and I think I really need to change that? I mean, who does that? What do? We look at the person and say, why do you have to say it that way? Or what are you talking about? Or whatever. We get defensive and we retaliate because we're trying to protect ourselves. We're trying to keep ourselves as is because we've grown accustomed to it. We're comfortable with it. You know, you can be comfortable with bad habits. You can be comfortable with a bad attitude. And so it happens all the time. And so you need to realize that you yourself are fully responsible for any change that's going to come to you. You're fully responsible for how you act and react when change is necessary or you notice that it needs to be made. And it's important that you understand that who you are is a product of your own mind. And so you are a product of your own mind as your mind negotiates the world. Who we're with, what we do, who we do it for. All these pieces are playing into the sphere of personal well-being. And as you are in this world, so will you affect the people around you. So we can affect people in a negative way. We can affect people in a positive way. And so, again, I want to reiterate, the people that struggle with this the most are the people who have a greater degree of emotional response to the world. Now, that doesn't mean non-emotional, logic-driven people can't have problems. They do. But they tend to stay inside rather than spilling out onto the people around them. It's the difference between introversion and extroversion. There's a difference between vomit and projectile vomit. If you've experienced one or the other, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Some people's personalities get on people. And when that happens, then the effects of how they feel and how they react and act in the world plays into the limbic system of other human beings. And so let me just reiterate, who you are is a product of your own mind, and only you can change your mind. Nobody can change your mind for you. Nobody can change your mind at all. Only you can change your mind. Now, other people can remind you of who you are and how you are, but only you can change who you are and how you are. It's important that we as people understand how our behavior is received or affects other people. Oftentimes when we're in a difficult situation with another person, we want to focus on what they're doing and how what they do affects us, rather than how we respond to circumstances, how we respond to other people. So what most people do is they want to make the other person's actions the piece that is responsible for their actions. And that's wrong. We have the ability to decide how we are going to act regardless of how anybody else is acting. So take, for instance, if I say to you, you just set me off again. The reality it is, I allowed you into my space, and my inability to control myself came out when you came in. And that's what happened. Now, I can couch it as you did this to me or you made me, but that completely removes personal responsibility and places it on somebody else. That's wrong. That's not how relationships work. And so, point number one, never say, you make me a better person, because nobody can make you do anything. They cannot make you become anything. Your becoming and your making of yourself are your fault and your responsibility. And so if you want your relationships to be healthy, take responsibility for who you are. And if you want to be a better person, never count on anybody else to help you do it. They can make suggestions. They can be there as an influence. But in the end, you are the only person that can make you better. So I hope that's helpful and you got something out of it. And we're going to look at the next point next time, which is never say you complete me. So I'll let you think about that, and we'll attack that one later. And until then, have a great week. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon.